Okay, so we've hit, well, nearly the halfway mark of the season, and good chance to have a bit of a break this weekend. I just want to thank everyone that has been helping out cover all the games, and I've been asking a few favours. We did have, I think it was like 45 unavailable last weekend, which just is part of the gig. I ask you to basically live your life, and where umpiring fits in, we appreciate it. So I understand there's going to be some unavailabilities, but we just seem to have a few more than usual at the moment, which is just up to me to sort out a way to cope. But I wouldn't be able to do it without all you guys helping out like you have been. So I really appreciate that. Okay, some things to cover off. Most of you, I just mentioned it. Yeah, we've got no games this weekend because of the King's birthday. And as I mentioned last week at training, we're going to have this Wednesday night off, just for everyone to have a bit of a rest. Obviously, next Monday there's no Zoom meeting because of the public holiday, so we've got a full week really just having a bit of a break, and we'll recommence business as usual Wednesday of next week with training, normal time and venue. So just on availability for Saturday week, we will be doing appointments this week. So if you know you're not going to be available for all or part of Saturday, June 14, can you please make sure you add leave straight away? That would make our job a lot easier. Some milestones looking towards round 8. So for Saturday week, we've got a few 50 gamers. So Sarah Jolly in the field, Damien Mello in the field, Robert Payne in the goal, Tony Crescicelli in the goal, and 100 goes up for Austin Macajo, who's one of our very good field umpires. So well done to you guys. Okay, so I want to cover off a couple of the errors that were in the quiz last week. So a couple of the answers to the quiz questions raised some eyebrows, and had a couple of you come to me questioning them, and rightfully so. We did have some discussion in the office about a couple of these, and I guess we didn't do our homework well enough. So important that we make sure that we get this right in our head going forward. I'm glad on the weekend that we didn't have anyone implement what I said in the quiz last week. So they're both regarding their interchange rules. So the first question was, a player is injured and in the hands of a trainer. The player leaves the field outside the official interchange bench. What does this mean for the player? I think we said the answer in the quiz that they couldn't come back on for 20 minutes. That's only the case if they're on a stretcher. So the true answer is nothing, as the player was with the trainer. And yeah, there would only be a 20-minute rule if there was a stretcher involved. The other one, which actually happened in a game this year, and it was an interesting scenario. So a player is sent off with the blood rule and leaves the field on their own outside the official interchange bench. What does this mean for the player? So in this scenario, it was Kilburn versus Westminster. The umpires did notice it, but I guess more importantly, Kilburn noticed it. It was a Westminster player. So Kilburn jumping up and down saying the player can't come back on. The umpires really didn't know what to do. It was in the last quarter, so they couldn't get on the phone and ring us to find out. They did make the player stay off for the rest of the game. And when it was raised during the week, we felt it was the right decision, but in closer examination, it wasn't the right decision. And I think this might be one of those rules that has perhaps changed over the time. AFL do update their rule book. And so the actual correct answer, which wasn't one of the questions, answers in the quiz, but what should happen in this scenario is a free kick is paid to the opposition team and a 25-metre penalty is awarded. So in the AFL, it would be a 50-metre, but the player can return to the field once the bleeding stops. So I'll obviously have that in the coaching notes. Just make sure you get your head around those answers. Interchange rules can be I guess, one of those things that aren't front of mind. And if you do get confused and you do want to find out on game day what you should do, and you have the opportunity to, then you can call Peter or myself, or we can work out the right answer. But yeah, in those couple of scenarios, yeah, it's important that you know a player can go off any part of the ground with a trainer or runner official, and that if they go outside of the interchange bench without a trainer, there is a penalty, but the penalty is a free kick and 25-minute penalty. All right. There was also a question, Mark Cosned. Mark, you on the line? I'm just trying to see if you are. So he raised the question about the even up rule. So he talked about a C grade game he had this year where it was an Eagle Farm C grade. They started with 18, but then one of the players had to go during the game, and then one of the players was the B grade coach. He had to go off, and so the question was, is it only for injury? And the answer is yes, only for injured players. So if it's a card, obviously you wouldn't have to even up. But if it's one of these other reasons that they're leaving because they've got something on, or that they're saving himself for the next game, or whatever it is, it doesn't mean that the other team have to even up. It's only for injury. That's really specific in the rules and regs. All right. Something else I need to raise. Umpires are not to start the game early. There's starting times for a reason. So there on the weekend, one of the A-grade games, they got out. One of the teams got out there early. They said, "Can we start early? We don't want to do all this warm up." The umpire can understand why they do it. They said, "Well, we'll see if the other team wants to start early," which the other team was happy to. So instead of 2:15, it started about 2:08, 2:09. What it did mean, though, was the company filming the game were under the impression that it was the B grade game, and they didn't start filming until 10 minutes in. So it just caused confusion. So at the end of the day, we stick to the official starting time. The only reason that would actually change is if there's an unexpected delay in the previous game. So we don't have the rule that a 2:15 game has to start at 2:15. We cut the game short early on. We let those previous games play out, and if it means that the later game is a bit delayed, then so be it. But we don't start the game early. And the last one, I have mentioned this past, but just a reminder, the situation where a player gets 2 yellow cards, that second yellow card turns into a red, so they go off for the rest of the game. They're going to cop a week suspension. When you go to input that in Officials HQ, you don't enter the details in the red card section. You just put 2 yellow cards in. It's much simpler, but also causes less confusion in the office here. So that's all I have. So have we got any questions from any of that, or anything else that happened on the weekend that anyone wants to raise?
Yeah, I got one, Cole.
Yep, Frankie?
Regarding, you broke it down well regarding the stretcher and the 20-minute rule.
Yep.
If the stretcher comes out and player elects not to go off on the stretcher, does the 20 minutes still apply?
In the league's rules and regs, it says that they don't get on. It does not apply.
Okay.
I think it might be different in the actual rule, in the Australian,
Different in the AFL rule book.
in the
That's it.
AFL rules, but the league's
Yep.
rules and regs say that you don't need to apply it.
Okay, perfect.
Good question. Sean? Yep.
So you talked about injuries and even up. What about at the beginning of the game if a team's got 17 or 16?
Yeah, so we don't need to know all the reasons why they can't be there. It's essentially they've only got 17 at the. It's a good point to clarify, but yeah, it is essentially they've only got 17 that have turned up, so the other team have to start with 17. It's during the game. Yeah, it's a good point. I'll make the change to the comments in the notes. But it's during the game if injuries occur. Yeah. Anyone else? All right. So I thought it'd be a bit pointless actually having a coaching video or doing anything too much to get you ready for a game because we don't have games this week. So I thought I'd use the opportunity to actually have a chat to a couple of people that we all probably know. Certainly those of us who've been around a while, but maybe how much do we know about them? And I first want to invite to the Zoom, if you could unmute himself, a man that I speak to several times a day during winter, and his work ethic is unreal, unbelievable, and he's just such a treasure to the Adelaide Footy League and to our umpiring group. I can see that he hasn't unmuted himself. He's getting on. He can't do it on his computer at home, so he's doing it on the phone. Hey, Angel, can you unmute your phone so you can speak to us?
How's that?
Haha, beautiful. Excellent. Good stuff. How you doing? I think this is about the 5th time we've spoken today.
Oh, about that.
Yeah. All right. Hey, mate, I just thought it'd be a good opportunity to, and there'll be some questions here I'll ask you that I don't know the answers to. So I guess let's hear a little bit about your story. Like, tell us about your working life. Like, what have you done through your time? Obviously, you're retired now, but yeah, what did you do to work for work?
I worked in the railways for 28 years from 1970 till 1998, whatever it was, and that. So 28 years in the railways. Then retired when they sold the railways. I was lucky enough to be in state super, so I got out in that. So after that, I was looking for something to do, so I did a bit of volunteer work for the local council, but footy was my love. So during the 70s and 80s, I was highly involved with the Railways Football Club, and that I only left them for 2 years, which was 80, 81. I went down to Seaton Ramblers and met a few good mates down there, but didn't like the climate down there. So I went back to Railways, which was then STA, then Trans Adelaide, and then Trans Adelaide Tigers till they folded. So that was 1998, I reckon they folded. And then from there on, I just went with me mate, and we just followed his lad around watching footy every week. And that's about it. Started my my footy career at Walkerville in 1965 as a junior, and was with them till 70 when I joined the Railways.
So when you say you're with Railways, you played?
Played just over 200 games for them. Secretary for 9 or 10 years. Also secretary of the Railways Tennis Club and the Cricket Club in the same time. So kept myself involved back in those days. So yeah, single person. I was a relief clerk in the Railways, so I did a fair bit of travelling, got to see a lot of the country. So that kept me out of mischief most of that time.
And as a player, what position did you play?
Played half forward, but then weight got the best of me, so I was better off as a back pocket, bubbles obs. Back pocket, full back, centre half back, depending on how good a side we had in those days.
And of the current umpires we have on our list, what umpires umpired you?
None.
Okay. You never had the pleasure of being umpired by Barry or Buzzy or?
No, they were above our level. They were too good for us.
Yeah. So yeah.
But we did have a couple of our players end up being umpires and one of them still umpiring for you, Colin Hass. So he played for Railways. We had Trevor Wiegand was also a railway person, but we had he played for a lot of clubs, I think. So but yeah, that was basically it.
Okay.
And I think most of the umpires we had against us in those days are probably passed away by now, or very few of them still left around.
And yeah, someone's asked, what was your nickname while you were playing? Did you have a nickname?
Yeah, they called me Space Shuttle. I don't know why.
Come on, what is the reason?
Well, they reckon when I hit somebody, they stayed hit. And usually, I'd be running at the ball, somebody hit me, and they'd be carried off on a stretcher and that, and I'd turn around and say, "What happened to him?" "Oh, he just hit you." So, and I remember one game I had one of my mates. He was coming towards me, and we're both going for the ball. I looked at him, and he looked at me, and I stopped, and he ended up on the ground, and he called me a bloody useless. I won't go with the rest of it, but he wasn't too impressed because he ended up on his backside, and I was still standing. So,
Did you ever get reported?
hey.
Did you ever get reported?
No, the only time I thought I might have got reported was I cleaned up a lad at CAE, broke about 6 of his ribs or something like that. And I was going in the change rooms at half time, and one of the blokes I knew because I was secretary, knew from the executive, he come into the room at half time and that, and I thought, oh shit, what have I done? I was trying to remember whether I lifted the elbow, whatever I'd done and that. And he come up and he said, "Best limpet shoulder I've ever seen." And that was it. So that's about the closest I ever got to being reported in my life.
So did you ever umpire yourself?
Sorry?
Did you ever umpire?
Never. Only goal umpired A and B grade, team manager A and B grade, only club umpiring. So that's about my limit there.
So what?
Had a few chats to the umpires and that, but I always got on well with umpires.
So what made you get involved in umpiring in the current role?
Well, I was out watching my mate play one day, and I had David Green, who was on the executive back in 2006. And he said to me, he said, "Oh, you know, we've met up and had a chat because I'd seen him for a couple of years." And he discussed it with me. He said, "Why don't you come and observe for the league?" I said, "If you're coming out to a game every week, you might as well get some recompense for it." And I said, "Oh, yeah, well, I've been idle for too long." So he gave me a number, and I rang up, and that was Barry Oates, and made an appointment the following week. Went in to 10th Street, sat down and talked to Barry for about 3 hours on my career and everything like that. And he turned around and said, "Can you start next Saturday?" And I'd never umpired in my life or observed or anything like that. So he just tutored me from there.
So that was just observing umpires initially? Was that what it was? Or?
Yeah, initially started there, and then he got into the idea that he had too much of a workload and that. So because he was doing the sample juniors as well and that. So he just created this umpiring coordinator's job, and that's where it's gone from there.
So you are the most driven person when it comes to administration. You are one step ahead of everyone. Your passion for organising and making phone calls and doing everything that's required is unbelievable. So some of you may get a bit of an idea of what Pete's like, but I guess for someone like myself that's in the role that I am, I get to see what you do and marvel at it. What drives you to be so driven? I can't believe how driven you are at times.
I think I just love footy, local footy. You can't beat it. I think I've been involved with it for that long now that the day I lose my passion for it, I won't follow umpiring. But while I've got the passion, I enjoy it. That's it. Keeps me occupied and probably still keeps me young.
Nice.
Yeah, and I've got 6 great nieces and nephews that play footy and that, so I get to see them on occasions and that when I can. And 4 of them are actually umpiring for us at the moment, so that's a good start.
That's excellent. That's really good. So I know which club it is, but admit which AFL club do you follow?
I'm a blues man everywhere, Perth, South Australia, and Victoria, and that started banking for Carlton when I first moved down to the city in about 1958, and that's it. So I've never wavered from that. The Crows come in there, I was, "Hey, you should be a Crows man." I said, "Why? I've been following Carlton since '61. Why should I stop following them now?" So, and that's how it was. Same thing with Sturt. Actually, it was funny how I started breaking for Sturt when I first came down because Mum bought me a beanie. It was double blue beanie. And the kids at school said, "Oh, who do you break for?" And I said, "Oh, that side." And not knowing anything about footy at the time, and that they hadn't won a game for 5 years or something. But I suppose I then got me back up and I said, don't you worry about that. Being the underdog was always a good thing, I thought, because we're always under everybody's guard.
So now being involved on the umpiring side, what have you learned about umpiring and umpires since you've taken this role on the last 20 years?
Oh, well, it's given me a different perspective. I suppose I've been on the other side of administration and all that. I've always been good at administration. And, you know, you're meeting different people every year. And I think I've been fortunate enough to have the ability that I can remember the majority of umpires I meet every year. And if I don't remember their name, I'll remember them by face. So I've had that ability all my life, I think. So I think that sets me in good place and I enjoy it. So as simple as that. And I couldn't see myself at the moment doing anything else. I get a 3-month break. What other job you get a 3-month break every year and then 6 months of work?
Very true. Well, I've got someone else to have a chat to in a moment, but if there's anyone on the Zoom that would like to ask Pete a question or just say anything to him, feel free to unmute yourself and come on. We don't often get a chance to actually talk to Pete like this. It's normally about business. But
yeah, I'll say something. I actually played. I saw Peter play his last couple of games, and because I was just starting at the Railways back then, and it was in the C grade, and he was playing full forward, and he was called Space Shuttle, and I remember he got smashed across the front of his nose. His nose got spread all over his face. Do you remember that, Pete?
Yeah, I do. And that was at part 9.
So if that had happened today, Sam, would you have reported the player that ran into him? Or
well, knowing Peter like I know him now, I wouldn't have reported the player.
Love
I had 3 games on that ground and 3 times I never finished the game on it.
it.
Broken nose, and the other 2 years I played on it were dislocated shoulders.
Jeez, it was. It's always been a tough game, but it was a tougher game back then, I reckon.
Yeah,
well, a dirtier one anyway. Anyone else before I move on? Pete, I say it over and over again, but I'll never say it enough. We are indebted to your work you do. You are a legend of Adelaide Footy League umpiring, and yeah, it makes my job a lot easier, but I know the umpires themselves just really appreciate what you do for them. So thank you.
No worries. Thank you.
All right. I'm going to move on now to, we heard from him before I started the Zoom, but Balesy, you want to unmute yourself?
Right.
There you go, mate. Now, the reason I'm going to have a chat to you, not many would know this. You're 13 games away from a significant milestone, and we're talking significant. So 13 games will take you to 1,000 Adelaide Footy League games, which is incredible. You must be excited about reaching that milestone.
Yeah. Sometimes I can't believe that I've done so many games. Other times I know it. But yeah, I did back in 2004. I did my 1,000th total games. That was with Sandful, with Amateur League. Well, it was with the Amateur League, as they called it then, and also SAFA and the North competition. So because I started back in 1969 and haven't missed a season since.
There you go. So you're a bit like Barry. You keep a record. You've got a book with all your games.
I'm not as detailed as Barry. He's the only one who does that, I think. Or there might be a few that are following his footsteps. But I've got records that I had from different associations, and I just kept some of those totals. So I had a fair idea of how many games I've done.
So if you're going to add your soon to be 1,000 Adelaide Footy League games,
yeah,
how many other games would have you done in other leagues?
Right. Well, I did just over 400 with the SAFA competition, which was basically all the amateur league teams anyway. And then I did nearly around 200 with the Norwood North competition, and I did some games out with the league when they took over the SAFA.
Okay.
So to be, if you add them all up, it would come up close to 1,600 to 2,000 around that mark. Not as many as Barry.
No, you got a bit of a way to go to Barry. So Buzzy, how did it all start for you? Were you a player that moved into umpiring?
Well, yeah. Well, it started when I was a young lad. My father, John Bales, he played juniors at. He was a vice captain of Norwood High School, and then the family moved up to the Northern Territory. And in the Northern Territory, when my dad was a junior, he had a bad knee injury, and they told him if he ever did his knee again, he wouldn't be able to walk, would only have a limp. So he stopped playing, and he was working, and it just started in an office after the war. He was in the Air Force during the war, and one of the guys in the office said, "Oh, I'm an umpire, John. Come, I know you're pretty fit. Come out with me, and I'll show you how to umpire." So he went out and picked up the basics, and he was in the league panel, as they had in those days, and they did most of their games out in the country. They supplied all the games for the country leagues, so they did a lot of travelling, and I used to talk to my dad about the games that he'd had, and then when he went to Darwin, he was the umpires coach, and he also, I suppose, that helped him get the state games and all those kind of things, the grand final. So I watched him umpire a lot of footy up there. And when I came down to Alice Springs, he did the same thing there. He was still umpiring and coaching. And then we came from Alice Springs down to Adelaide to go for school educational reasons. After I'd finished intermediate, as it was in those days, and I'd only played a bit of school footy, and I went out to Norwood. I went to Norwood High School, and they only had two teams. They had the A's and the B's, and if you come in from somewhere without anyone recommending you, they said, right, you're the 10th reserve for the B grade. We'll let you know if we've got a game. They didn't even bother looking because they had some really good players out there. They had the Woodcocks, and they had Neil Craig, and players, really, really top line players. John Nettlefold, for some of the people who remember those old names. So instead of playing football, I then took up umpiring to help when I was at university. I went to university, and I thought, that'll help pay a few bills. But I played hockey at high school because I sat next to a kid who was pretty quick, and he was the vice captain of the hockey team, and he knew I could move pretty quick in those days. And he got me in the hockey team, and in the first game I hit 4 goals. And there was a talent scout from Burnside watching, and he came up and signed me up straight away. So I ended up playing hockey for Burnside. But the hockey season used to overlap with the umpiring season. So eventually I gave up the playing the hockey and just concentrated on the footy.
Yeah, nice. So when did you stop playing, and when did you start concentrating on the umpiring?
When I was about 18, 19, I started doing the first junior games. 18, they had what they called the Norwood Juniors, and that was the underage competitions. And then the Norwood North competition was where the senior games were. So I went over to that and began umpiring quite a few games in the Norwood North competition.
Hey,
yeah.
Before we get on to umpiring,
yeah,
I know a passion of yours that always comes around when we do the Indigenous game from Power Cup. You've got a real passion for Indigenous culture.
Yeah.
Why is that? Is there a family?
Yeah, there's a family connection there. Our family were pioneers back in the 1800s in the far north of South Australia, and my grandfather and his elder brother were artesian well borers and engineers, but they came from a farming background. So Dad's uncle had a big cattle station with goats and cattle and horses. And they had sons, and the Bales men had children with the Aboriginal girls on the station, and the children then took the father's name, the Bales surname, and but that was sort of kept quiet from our part of the family. But we found out. I was doing a bit of family history, and one of my cousins actually he went to Norwood High School, and I umpired him in an early game years ago when I first started umpiring. And he said that he checked up the electoral roll, and he said there's a Cooper Bales living in Oodnadatta. He said, who the hell would that be? Because he knew I knew a fair bit about the family history. And I said he could only be a relative because my grandfather's name was Cooper Bales. And so I rang up. I looked in the postal directory, and I rang up the phone number, and Cooper Bales actually answered the phone in Oodnadatta, and then he explained who he was and who his grandfather was, and his grandfather was my dad's cousin. So we had the black Bales and the white Bales. So we've all descended from the same English great grandparents, but I've got a whole heap of Aboriginal family. And if you're ever connected to an Aboriginal family, that's it. You're part of the family. You know, they don't discriminate about how much, what percentage of you is white or whatever.
Okay, so that explains, because so you there's no Indigenous blood in you,
No.
but your family has plenty of Indigenous blood.
Yeah. But the Bales have Indigenous. There's Bales that have the Indigenous blood. Yeah.
Gotcha. Hey,
I had a cousin, Billy Bales, and he told me all the stories, and that ended up with me writing a book once I retired from teaching.
Yeah,
well,
nice.
Sort of retired.
Yeah. Now, before the last one, before we get on to umpiring, Sam has asked, you write poetry. Ask him why his poems don't rhyme.
Right, because
He's such a stirrer, Sam.
Yeah, Sam's showing his age, because in the day when he went to school, which is probably a fair while back now, all poetry had to rhyme, because that was what teachers and the educated classes and the upper classes thought was real poetry. It had to rhyme and had to have certain patterns. But from about the year 1900 onwards, poetry had its own development, and rhymed verse is now a minority. There's most of the well-known poets don't write rhymed poetry. There's still a rhythm and there's still a pattern, so you can still tell it's poetry. But that's what happened there with that kind of thing.
Oh, very good. Yeah, Sam said sorry he asked. we're gonna move on from poetry to umpiring. We've only got 5 minutes left. So what's been some of your highlights in all those years of umpiring? What do you look back on most fondly?
Right. Well, one of the things that really was one of my highlights was doing the 1000th game with Craig Trewatha, and we had a really good panel together. It's not too many of them left now. That was back in 2004, so that was a great time. And then I had also a grand final, a Div 2 grand final that I did with Brad God Webber. A lot of you remember Brad Webber. He knew everything, so we used to call him God. But we had a game at Norwood Oval, which was a really tight game. And my son, Serge, was a boundary umpire, and he was on the boundary. So it was, again, it was a good family memory. It was a great grand final. I think it was won by Salisbury North. Salisbury North were favourite, but they lost. So that was a close game, which we really remembered. That was good.
Not the last time that Salisbury North were favourite and lost. They've had a few of those over the years. Hey, I've got to ask you, Balsy.
Yeah.
How many red cards and reports have you had over the years?
Not that many.
No, I know that.
Yeah. And a lot of the older umpires will appreciate this. People often say, "Oh, why don't such and such and such have many red cards?" Mainly because you can prevent a lot of that before it happens. You can almost smell it and almost tell who's about to whack someone and who's not. And if you get in fast enough, I remember Gary McIntosh was a case in point case in mine. If Gary got a bit upset and something you wanted to even up, you'd say, "Gary, come on, I'm right next to you. You can't whack him, or you'll be off on a red card." So you can prevent a lot of that. But I think Gory and I had a couple of red cards together, and a few other umpires, but haven't been too many.
Okay, so at least you've had some. I have to. I do know that for a fact that Des Foster, who's a very well-known umpire, never had one report in his entire umpiring career. And he umpired David Granger. So, but yeah, so there are times where you have to stand up and do it. But yeah, I do take your point that you can use your communication skills to limit sometimes, that's for sure. Hey, Balsy, I've only got a couple of minutes left.
Yeah.
Mate, you've had a crazy fantastic career. And you talked about celebrating 1,000 games before. We're going to have another 1,000 game celebration when you achieve it. Could be later this year, could be early next, but I reckon you'll probably get it this year, mate. You're a treasure of our group. You know, such a smiling face and positive person. Well done for everything you've achieved, and may there be many more.
Yeah, I appreciate it, and you keep on doing what you're doing, Colin. You're doing a good job.
Good on you, mate. All right. So as I said, it's about to wind up. Is anyone else want to say anything before we do finish up? I feel like I'm signing off for the year, but it's only going to be signing off for a week. Be nice to have a bit of a break. I think we all need it. So it doesn't look like anyone else is unmuting themselves or have anything else to say. Thanks to Pete and thanks to Balsey for sharing a bit of their stories tonight. Enjoy the next few days off, and we'll see you at training on Wednesday week and get ready for the rest of the season.